Hello everyone, my name is Jeff Rolka. Thank you for checking out my video. This is questions from comments 28 plus 1 because I missed a question from my question sheet for number 27, so I'm going to cover that today. This is chaptered, so if you want to skip around or look at a specific question or something to that effect, you can certainly do so, though I'd appreciate it if you would watch what's going on here. You never know what you might pick up. Some really great questions, but only a few, which is going to let me go a little bit more in depth on some, though I don't think that they all require exhaustive answers. Thank you if you've chosen to subscribe. Let's get started. This is the one that I missed from last week. And I'm paraphrasing a bit from the question, and it was, what is scooping? Is it bad? When I've heard scooping discussed in vocal circles, it seems to be a bad thing. Scooping is debatable depending on how you want to look at it. One might argue that it is an inaccurate means by which to attain a certain pitch. Others would say that it is just inherently a part of legato singing, but we want to minimize it as much as we possibly can. Still more might argue that it is a stylistic affectation. In brief, scooping is when you kind of come in just a little bit below the pitch and then whoop, scoop up to it. You might think of it as a small glissando or a small portamento. Those are also legit ways to talk about scooping. You generally hear scooping happening when people are going from a lower note to a higher note via a leap, like a skip. So for example, if I were going from G to D, E, 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 E. Now in the strictest sense, if we are connecting these two pitches, we're going to try to be as accurate as we possibly can, and there's still going to be a little bit of connection there, a little bit of scoop. I'm just a human after all. E, E. But if I anticipate where that D natural is, and I begin the process of increasing my engagement before I move off of the G, I can minimize that scooping as much as I can. The thing with scooping is that generally it's a lot more prevalent than that. It might almost sound as if you're singing the lower scale degree, in this case a C natural, and then gliding up or scooping up to the D from there. In those instances, the phrase would sound like this. E, but it would go more quickly. E, E. And what is often happening there is that the vocalist has misjudged where the upper note is, or they simply haven't engaged enough engagement to adequately go to the pitch, and so they're starting at the lower pitch and then scooping up to that top pitch. The problem with this is that it is inherently increasing the tension around the vocal fold. And what this has the tendency to do is to make us sing flat, because what we're doing is we're really configured for the lower pitch, and then we're using muscle tension, gripping around the vocal fold to force them together to vibrate more quickly. And generally speaking, we don't quite make it. If you want to have scooping as a part of your style, shall we say, then my advice to you is to learn your phrases upside down. So if you're going to sing that phrase that I've been demonstrating, the G to D thing, and it happens from G to D in the song, E, then learn it first by going E, E, so that you can really set yourself up for the D natural, and then just include enough of a scoop so that you get that affectation, that color or style that you're looking for, but not so much that you're using a lot of vocal fold engagement and you're ending up flat. I hope that answers the question around scooping. It is a somewhat hotly debated topic. I have seen individuals suggest that you can learn to sing high notes by gliding up to them over and over again. I would make arguments against that, though there is an argument to be made for techniques like the siren, where you're gliding up and down across the secondo passaggio or across the break. The argument there, however, is that you are in fact cultivating release. And if you learn to make that transition, but then learn to use the head voice or use the cricothyroid dominant singing voice intentionally, you can then build that into your technique and ultimately have less overall vocal fold engagement and not have as much scooping. Let's keep going now. Nice background, looking great. Thank you. How can one tell which vowel is weaker or not as prevalent? Recordings are really helpful in this case, so making a recording of yourself and listening back to it. Ultimately, it's observing. This relates to the questions from comments 27 about whether or not you need a vocal coach, because you have to listen objectively and critically to your own phonation and learn to tell the differences. When asked that question in the previous edition of this segment, my overarching point was we don't know what we don't know. So if you really cannot tell, if you really don't know and cannot hear the differences between the phonations, that's where perhaps starting with examples online, listening to when I give examples of saying these are in alignment, these are out of alignment. Somewhat, again, of a dramatic example, but you get the point. Alignment versus out of alignment, listening critically to what you are hearing, listening for qualities beyond, that sounds good, that sounds bad to me, but what are the qualities of that sound? Is it pinched? What would pinched be? I'd say that's pinched. So is this pinched? I would argue that it isn't. Is it balanced? Well, what would out of balance sound like? Is that balanced? I would argue that it is not balanced. That is way too abducted in the vocal fold. Those are some examples of how we can move through a very poorly adducted, poorly closed vocal fold, or an abducted vocal fold, to one that is reasonably balanced, to one that is using too much vocal fold engagement. And we go through this with all of our vowels, listening to them critically to hear the differences between them. When we find vowels that we are singing well, we can use those as anchor points for comparison with the vowels that maybe need some more work. I literally cannot trill at all for more than 3 seconds. A common occurrence. You are not alone, and I would suggest to you that you also can learn to do the lip trill if you are willing to take a few steps to work on it a little bit, maybe devote a little bit of time to the practice. One, if when you try the lip trill, you say you can't do it for more than 3 seconds, that suggests to me that you're not, in fact, maintaining your engagement consistently. So if you're getting practices like where it's kind of pulsing like that, that's a pretty clear indication that you are, in fact, kind of applying engagement when you're trying to make pitch, and then you're releasing that muscle engagement in those pauses or in between pitches. We want to try to maintain this as consistently as we can. The amount of engagement will vary depending on the range of our voices, but the idea of keeping it engaged is consistent. So when you do the lip trill, you can maintain a nice line. You'll notice that I have my thumb and middle finger right there in the corners of my mouth. I do this because I want to foster as little muscle engagement in the outer musculature of my face as I can. If I do the lip trill without my hand, I have to purse my lips a little bit more than if I put my fingers here. And because we need consistent engagement whenever we're singing, and we don't always need muscle engagement here, I am a big advocate for using the fingers at the face. Notice that this is a very, very minor adjustment to the lip trill. Here's my face in neutral. Here's my face with my fingers gently supporting my lips, sort of pushing inward. Virtually no difference, right? I've seen some people try to do this practice like this. That's not going to work. That's going to make it far, far more difficult, in fact, in a not positive way. There is another exercise that I call the super lip trill, where you grab and pull. That will really connect you with your engagement and challenge you to maintain consistency. But there are also some practices you can do to get the lip trill going. If you are finding that it's just insurmountable initially, none of these sort of little tricks and things work. In Seth Riggs' book, Singing for the Stars, he advocates falling forward into the lip trill when you are trying to get it going. If you do that, one, make sure there's nothing in front of you so you don't clock your head on it. Two, you really have to foster this idea of falling. You cannot lower your body gently forward. It has to be a release and a falling kind of feeling. Again, that is from Seth Riggs' book, Singing for the Stars. Additionally, I might advocate that you do some exercises, and you can do these with any vowel patterns, any of the sort of like the gentle warm-ups or the not full range warm-ups on my channel. But instead of doing them with the vowels, do them with a Z sound. If that's still too hard, do it with hissing. We want the hiss to be consistent without any kind of pauses or pulses. If it's pulsing, then you're pushing where the pitches are and you're slacking off where they're not. It's a consistent flow of air that we're looking for. Great question, though. Oh, I might also add, in my free course on my website at jeffrollke.com, you sign up for the newsletter, you get the passwords for the free course. I go through a lot of practices to get the lip trill started, and you might look into those. Finally, Jeff, I study with a vocal coach here in LA over Zoom. First of all, great, that's awesome, and I hope you're having a wonderful time with your teacher. Apparently, I'm very nasal, especially when I'm doing the warm-up exercise of ooh in the range of E4 to G sharp 5. She is also trying to help me to bring my sound from the back of my head, throat, and out through my mouth. So notice that there's a bit of a discrepancy here. If it's too nasal, but it's too far back, those would seem to be at odds, but I think that there's a path forward for us here. I think holding back comes from singing in New York City apartments and not wanting to be too loud and annoy my neighbors. That's tricky, and unfortunately is all too frequently a common occurrence where people don't want to allow their voice to resonate as fully as it might because they're concerned about neighbors or people hearing or annoying their roommate or something to that effect. And that can unfortunately build some habits into our phonations which are not ideal. But anyway, I'm a mezzo-soprano. What do you recommend for being my full voice out the front of my mouth and for decreasing my nasality? Maybe one day you could do a video on these. I've actually done several videos on these topics already. I do falsetto warm-ups and I hold my nose when practicing warm-ups as well as your warm-ups. Thank you for your guidance and beautiful heart and spirit that comes through in every video. First of all, you're welcome. There's actually quite a few exercises that you can do to evaluate. So If you're truly nasal and you can't bring it out at all, then some of the exercises that I use for this are the nose pinching exercises. And so start these in a very comfortable range. You don't neither too high nor too low, in a nice comfortable area. Sing your scales and pinch. And if I've done my work properly, you haven't heard much of a difference when I've pinched my nose. That's what we're looking for. We don't want to hear a lot of change. Now, if you're truly nasal, you'll hear a fairly dramatic difference in the tone quality when you pinch the nose. The thing about nasality, or being too far back, is that yes, there's a certain degree of airflow changes, but it is more about how the vocal fold is adducting or staying abducted in the phonation process. Generally, when we have a sound that is too nasal, it is because we don't have quite the right balance in the adduction of the vocal fold. Generally, it is too abducted, or too much separation is being fostered in your phonation, and that's what generates that sound. And as you get more practice with a well-adducted tone quality, the nasality tends to reduce. You can foster that by pinching and releasing. You may feel a vibration in your fingers when if you're really nasal and you pinch it, you'll feel some vibration in the sinus cavity, and you can try to conceptualize of it being back. What this will do is it will help you to balance phonation at the vocal fold, removing that excess resonance there. Some other exercises that are great for balancing phonation, in other words, getting a well-adducted vocal fold, short vowel exercises like that. If you find that with a he syllable you get too much airflow where it sounds like this, he, it's very breathy, then you might start with a W. We. Additionally, one of my favorite exercises for balancing tone quality in general, and honestly this exercise works for a lot of different things, but this is one of them, is the NG sound, and starting by exploring the sort of extremes. So you might start your NG, and so the NG noise or sound is produced if you said the word sing or hung. I kind of like hung better. Hung. Imagine H-U-N-G, and then you hang on that NG. Hung. The tongue is lifting in the rear of the mouth, and it is in fact closing off airflow to your mouth. Now you might say, but I want the sound to come out of my mouth. Yeah, well, you'll get to that in a second. It will sound more balanced by assessing how the vocal fold is adducting and the balance of tone quality in this NG noise. So if you're really nasal and you sing with this in your typical fashion, then you'll get that really, really forward, pointy kind of sound. But you can explore that. You can also explore what it's like to remove it entirely. Can you make it go away entirely? Can you find a middle? And when you find the middle, then can you release to an ah sound? And generally speaking, when you've found too far forward and you've found too far back, and by feeling those things out and coming to a center point, then learning to release carefully there, you find that nice balanced tone that has the impression of coming out of your mouth, which I hope is what you're going for here. and asking about in your question. Thank you very much, all of you, for these questions. I think they're really, really great. I appreciate it. If you have any follow-ups or questions of your own, you can drop them in the comments below. And until next time, I'll say thank you very, very much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you if you found me on Patreon and are a supporter there. I really appreciate it. And take really good care of your voices. Enjoy singing, and hopefully we'll see you again. Bye.